Lottie Cain was only 17 when she rode into Dust Hollow to watch a killer hang. But when the outlaw in the noose looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I know you," she stopped riding away and started asking questions. Lottie Cain lived in Dust Creek, a town so small it felt like the desert might swallow it whole any day now. The sun beat down on everything, making the wooden buildings look tired and the dusty streets shimmer. Lottie felt a lot like those buildings, worn down and out of place. She was taller than most of the girls her age, with eyes that always seemed to be searching for something beyond the horizon. Dust Creek wasn't a place for dreamers, but Lottie couldn't help it. She spent her days helping her mother at the general store, but her mind was always wandering. She felt different from the other kids, like she didn't quite belong. They all seemed to know their place, their families stretching back generations in this hardscrabble land. Lottie's past felt like a blank page. Then the whispers started. A man was captured, a notorious outlaw named Rufus Black. He was going to be hanged at sunrise. It was awful, but what made Lottie's heart pound was what she overheard Mrs. Gable saying to the baker. "They say he has a daughter, Lottie Cain, can you imagine?" The whispers grew louder, swirling around Lottie like dust devils. At first, they were just snippets of conversations, hushed voices stopping abruptly when she walked by. Then came the stares. Women would clutch their children closer, men would tip their hats with a strange mix of pity and suspicion. It was as if she had suddenly become a different person, marked by something she didn't even understand. "Did you hear?" she overheard one woman say outside the bakery. "Rufus Black's daughter." "Right here in Dust Creek." Another voice, sharp and judgmental, replied, "Birds of a feather, I always say." Lottie's stomach twisted into knots. Rufus Black. The name echoed in her mind, a dark and dangerous sound. He was a legend, a villain from the dime novels her mother forbade her from reading. He was a ghost story whispered around campfires, and now these whispers connected him to her. She tried to ignore it, to pretend she didn't hear. But the whispers followed her everywhere, clinging to her like the desert dust. The weight of their words pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. The idea that this outlaw could be her father was a seed of doubt planted deep within her, threatening to sprout and change everything she thought she knew. Lottie couldn't bear the whispers any longer. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery hues, she found her mother mending clothes on the porch. Sarah Cain was a strong woman, weathered by the desert and life's hardships. Her hands, though calloused, were gentle. Lottie hesitated, her throat tight with fear. "Mama," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "they're saying things about Rufus Black." Sarah's hands stilled. Her eyes, usually warm and welcoming, turned cold and hard as flint. She didn't look at Lottie. "Gossip," she said sharply. "Pay it no mind." "But they say he's my father." Lottie blurted out, the words hanging heavy in the air. Sarah finally looked up, her gaze piercing. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she sighed, a sound filled with weariness. "I told you he was dead, Lottie. That's all you need to know." "But is it true?" Lottie pressed, her voice trembling. "Was Rufus Black my father?" Sarah's silence was her answer. Lottie's heart sank. Everything she thought she knew about her life crumbled. Her mother had lied. The man she believed was gone was about to be hanged, and he was her father. The weight of her mother's lie settled on Lottie, heavy and suffocating. She couldn't just stand by and let a man, her father, be hanged without even seeing him. She had to know the truth for herself. "I'm going to town, Mama," Lottie said, her voice now firm, a newfound resolve hardening her gaze. Sarah looked at her, her expression unreadable. "Don't," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "It's better to leave the past buried." "It's not buried if they're about to hang him," Lottie retorted. "I have to see him, I have to know." Without another word, Lottie turned and headed for the stables. She saddled her horse, a sturdy mare named Bess, her movements quick and efficient. Bess sensed Lottie's urgency, pawing the ground impatiently. As Lottie swung into the saddle, she glanced back at her mother, who stood on the porch, a lone figure silhouetted against the fading light. Sarah looked small and defeated, her shoulders slumped. Lottie felt a pang of guilt, but the need to uncover the truth was stronger. She urged Bess forward, the horses' hooves kicking up dust as they galloped towards town, towards the unknown. The sunrise and the hanging were getting closer. As Lottie and Bess approached the town, the atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive. Unlike Dust Creek, redemption was bustling, but not with its usual energy. A grim cloud hung over everything. People moved with purpose, their faces etched with a mixture of morbid curiosity and righteous judgment. The gallows stood tall in the town square, a stark silhouette against the pre-dawn sky, a grim reminder of the fate awaiting Rufus Black. Carpenters hammered away, making last-minute adjustments. A preacher stood nearby, Bible in hand, muttering prayers. The crowd was starting to gather, a sea of faces both familiar and unknown. Lottie felt their eyes on her, whispers following her as she rode through the town. She dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, her legs feeling shaky. The building was small and weathered, but the sense of authority emanating from it was palpable. Lottie tied Bess to the hitching post, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The air inside was thick with tension, the smell of stale coffee and fear lingering in the air. A deputy sat behind a desk, his face grim. He looked up as Lottie entered, his eyes narrowing. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. Lottie stood tall, despite the deputy's intimidating gaze. "I want to see Rufus Black," she stated, her voice clear and firm, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The deputy chuckled, a harsh, humorless sound. "That ain't gonna happen, missy. Visiting hours are over, and besides, he's not expecting company." "I'm his daughter," Lottie said, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. The deputy's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Well, now, isn't that interesting? Still can't see him. Sheriff's orders. No one sees him before the hanging." Lottie refused to back down. "I have a right. He's my father. I deserve to see him, to speak with him." She stood her ground, her eyes locking with the deputy's. He sighed, recognizing the stubbornness in her gaze. "Hold on," he grumbled, and disappeared into a back room. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Lottie waited, the silence broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. Finally, the deputy emerged, followed by a tall, imposing figure, Sheriff Brody, his face etched with years of dealing with the rough characters of the West. "What's this I hear about you being Black's daughter?" The sheriff asked, his voice gruff. "State your business, girl." "I need to see him, Sheriff," Lottie pleaded, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to remain strong. "I need to know if it's true, if he's really my father." Sheriff Brody studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the raw emotion that couldn't be faked. Finally, he sighed. "All right," he conceded, "but you get 5 minutes and I'm staying with you." He led her through the dimly lit jail cells, the clang of metal echoing in the silence. Lottie's heart pounded in her chest with each step. She didn't know what to expect, what to say. They stopped in front of a cell at the end of the row. Inside, a man sat on a cot, his back to them. He was thin, his hair long and matted, but there was still a hint of the rugged outlaw described in the dime novels. "Black," the sheriff said gruffly. "You got a visitor." The man slowly turned, his eyes meeting Lottie's. They were the same color as hers, a startling shade of green. A flicker of recognition sparked in their depths, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Lottie," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Is that really you?" Tears welled up in Lottie's eyes. I thought you were dead," she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. Rufus's smile faded, replaced by a look of deep regret. "I'm sorry, Lottie," he said softly. "I never wanted this for you." "Why didn't you tell me?" Lottie asked, her voice rising in anger. "Why did Mama lie?" "It was for your own good," Rufus replied, his eyes pleading. "The life I lived, it wasn't safe. I wanted you to have a normal life away from all this." He gestured to the cell, to the town outside, to his life of crime. Sheriff Brody cleared his throat, a reminder of their limited time. "Time's wasting, girl," he said gruffly. Lottie ignored him, her gaze fixed on Rufus. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are they hanging you?" Rufus hesitated, his eyes clouding over with pain. "It's a long story, Lottie," he said. "One I don't have time to tell. Just know that I did what I thought was right. I always tried to protect the people I cared about." He paused, then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "There's something you need to know." "There's a strong box," Rufus whispered, his voice strained. "Hidden behind the old mill near Dust Creek. It belongs to your mother. She doesn't know I know about it." Lottie frowned, confused. "What's in it?" "Important things," Rufus said, his eyes darting nervously towards Sheriff Brody. "Things that could clear my name, or at least explain why I did what I did." He paused, then added, "But be careful, Lottie. There are others who know about the strongbox, people who want it for themselves. He reached out, his hand grasping hers through the bars of the cell. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his fingers calloused but warm. "Promise me, Lottie," he pleaded. "Promise me you'll find it, and promise me you'll be careful." Lottie looked into his eyes, seeing a mixture of fear and desperation. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I promise," she said. Sheriff Brody stepped forward, his face grim. "Time's up," he announced. "Let's go, girl." He pulled Lottie away from the cell, severing the connection between her and the father she had just met. As she was led away, Lottie glanced back at Rufus. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hope and resignation, a silent farewell. Back in the street, the sky was beginning to lighten, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange. The crowd was growing larger, their faces expectant, eager for the spectacle to come. Lottie felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She had promised Rufus she would find the strongbox, but the sun would rise soon. As she walked towards Bess, she replayed Rufus's words in her mind. A strongbox hidden behind the old mill. What could it contain? Proof of his innocence, a map to stolen treasure. Or something even more dangerous. The thought that others were also searching for it sent a shiver down her spine. She knew she had to act fast, every minute counted. If the strongbox held the key to saving Rufus, she couldn't waste any time. But going back to Dust Creek would mean facing her mother, facing the questions she wasn't ready to answer. It would also mean risking everything, putting herself in danger. Lottie hesitated, torn between her loyalty to her mother and her promise to her father. But in the end, her curiosity, her need to know the truth, won out. She swung onto Bess and turned her towards the path leading back to Dust Creek, the rising sun casting long shadows before her. The race against time had begun. The ride back to Dust Creek felt longer, the landscape blurring into a monotonous expanse of scrub and sand. Lottie urged Bess onward, her mind racing. The sun was climbing higher in the sky, each ray a reminder of the dwindling time she had left. She knew the hanging was scheduled for sunrise, and it wouldn't be long now. As she neared the old mill, she slowed Bess to a walk, scanning the surroundings. The mill stood dilapidated and forgotten, its wooden frame weathered and crumbling. It had been abandoned years ago, a relic of a bygone era, the perfect place to hide a secret. She dismounted and tied Bess to a gnarled mesquite tree, her senses on high alert. The air was still and silent, the only sound the gentle breeze rustling through the dry grass. She approached the mill cautiously, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife she always carried. She circled the building, her eyes searching for any sign of the strongbox, any indication that someone else had been there before her. She checked behind loose boards, under piles of debris, her heart pounding with each fruitless search. Where could it be? Suddenly she heard a sound, a twig snapping nearby. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Someone was watching her. She wasn't alone. Lottie whirled around, her knife raised, her eyes darting around the perimeter. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of rotting lumber, a young man no older than herself, with a nervous expression on his face. She recognized him as Caleb, the baker's son from Redemption. "Caleb," Lottie asked, lowering her knife slightly. "What are you doing here?" Caleb shuffled his feet, avoiding her gaze. I heard what happened," he stammered, "about Rufus Black being your father." Lottie's eyes narrowed, and I don't think he deserves to die," Caleb blurted out, his voice filled with conviction. "I know what people say about him, but my pa always said there was more to the story." Lottie hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. "Did you come to help me find the strong box?" Caleb nodded eagerly. "I know this mill like the back of my hand. I can help you search." He paused, then added, "But we have to hurry. They'll be hanging him soon." Lottie studied him carefully, trying to gauge his sincerity. She desperately needed help, but trusting a stranger was a risk. However, she didn't have much of a choice. "All right," she said, her voice firm, "but if you're lying to me." "I'm not," Caleb insisted, his eyes pleading. "I just want to do what's right." Together they resumed the search, their hopes rising with each passing moment, the execution drawing ever closer. After what felt like hours of frantic searching, Caleb let out a shout. "I found it," he yelled, his voice echoing through the mill. Lottie rushed to his side, her heart pounding with anticipation. Caleb had pried open a loose floorboard, revealing a small wooden strongbox hidden beneath. It was old and worn, its surface covered in dust and grime. They wrestled the strongbox open, their hands trembling with excitement. Inside, they found a stack of letters, a worn leather-bound journal, and a small, intricately carved wooden bird. Lottie quickly scanned the letters, her eyes searching for anything that could help Rufus. They were love letters written by her mother to Rufus years ago, filled with passion and longing. They didn't offer any proof of his innocence. She grabbed the journal, flipping through its pages. It was Rufus's diary, chronicling his life as an outlaw. Most of it detailed robberies and narrow escapes, but then she found a passage describing a deal he made with a corrupt businessman who framed him for a crime he didn't commit. "This is it," Lottie exclaimed, her voice filled with hope. This could save him. But the handwriting was faded and difficult to read, and the businessman's name was only mentioned once without any details. Lottie knew that presenting this evidence would be risky, but she had no other choice. She had to get back to redemption and fast. But how? The sun was already peeking over the horizon. She needed a plan. "I have a plan," Lottie said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Caleb, you know the back roads better than anyone. You take the journal and ride to redemption as fast as you can. Show it to your father. Maybe he can convince someone to listen." Caleb looked hesitant. "What about you?" "I'll create a distraction," Lottie said, her voice firm. "Something to buy you some time." She knew it was a risky plan, but it was the only chance they had. She grabbed the wooden bird from the strongbox, tucking it into her pocket. "Meet me at the town square," she instructed. "If I can, I'll be there." Caleb nodded, grabbed the journal, and raced out of the mill, disappearing down the dusty road. Lottie took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. It was time to put her plan into action. She knew she couldn't just walk into redemption and expect people to listen to her. She needed to make a statement, something that would grab their attention. She thought of the love letters she saw in the strongbox, and an idea sparked. She grabbed some dry hay from the mill and ran to the Cain family store, found the most flammable oil she could find, and created a small fire with the letters inside, hoping the thick smoke would get people's attention. Her plan was risky, but she hoped her distraction would give Caleb enough time to reach redemption. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, quickly attracting the attention of the townsfolk. People rushed towards the Cain family store, their faces etched with alarm. Lottie watched from a distance, her heart pounding, knowing she had little time. As the townsfolk were busy putting out the fire, Lottie rode Bess hard toward redemption, using the commotion as cover. By the time she reached the town square, the sun was fully risen. The crowd was silent, all eyes fixed on the gallows. Rufus Black stood on the platform, his head bowed, his face pale. Sheriff Brody stood beside him, his expression grim. Lottie dismounted, pushing her way through the crowd, ignoring the angry shouts and accusing stares. She reached the front, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Stop!" she yelled. "You can't do this." Sheriff Brody frowned. "Lottie, get out of here. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me more than anyone," Lottie retorted, her eyes blazing with defiance. "He's my father, and he's innocent." She pulled the wooden bird from her pocket, holding it up for everyone to see. "This belonged to him. He gave it to my mother. He's not the monster you think he is." The crowd murmured, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Lottie knew she had to convince them, to make them see the truth. But how? Her evidence was thin, her words were just a whisper against the weight of public opinion. Would anyone believe her? Just as Sheriff Brody was about to order the hanging to proceed, a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "Stop! I have evidence." Caleb pushed his way through the throng, his face flushed, his voice breathless. He thrust the journal into Sheriff Brody's hands. "My father read this. It says Rufus Black was framed. A man named Silas Thorne paid him to take the fall." Sheriff Brody hesitated, his eyes scanning the crowd. Silas Thorne was a powerful and respected businessman in redemption. Accusing him was a dangerous game. He opened the journal, his brow furrowed as he deciphered Rufus's faded handwriting. The crowd held its breath, waiting for his verdict. After what felt like an eternity, Sheriff Brody looked up, his face grim. This could be true," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But we need more proof." Suddenly, a woman stepped forward from the crowd. It was Sarah Cain, Lottie's mother. She walked towards the gallows, her face etched with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "It's true," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Rufus was framed. I saw it happen. I was too afraid to speak up. The crowd gasped, their faces filled with shock. Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly. Sela's thorn threatened me, threatened Lottie. I did what I thought was best to protect her. Sheriff Brody looked at Rufus, then at Lottie, then at Sarah. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Take him down," he ordered, his voice filled with resignation. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Rufus was released from the gallows, his eyes meeting Lottie's. A faint smile touched his lips. He was safe. In the end, Silas Thorne was arrested and Rufus Black was exonerated. Lottie's life had changed forever. She finally knew who she was, where she came from. She was Lottie Cain, daughter of an outlaw and a woman who loved him fiercely, and she was proud. She decided to stay in redemption, helping her mother and getting to know the father she had never known. She knew her life would never be easy, but she was ready for whatever came her way. She was no longer an outsider. She was home.